I'm really excited to, or just really excited about this next talk because CSS has not stopped advancing in this year in 2025. It doesn't show any signs of stopping either. It feels nearly impossible for anyone to be completely up to date with all these new CSS toys that we have coming out. But this talk is a huge step towards fixing that. You probably know Adam from all the amazing demos that he publishes over at CodePen. Or perhaps you're familiar with all of his experiments that he shares on his blog over at nerdy.dev. Perhaps you just know him from his work over at the Chrome Developer Relations team, or maybe his work with the CSS Working Group. Whatever the case, I want to CSS like Adam when I grow up, and I'm really happy to welcome him up here to the virtual stage. So folks, please welcome Adam ARGYLE.
Hey, thank you so much. I do CSS stuff. I like CSS. So many people were like, CSS, I don't like you. And I was like, well, I might not like you now. So that's the relationship I guess we're going to have. But hey, Jeff, thanks for inviting me on.
Hey,
I like you. You like CSS.
I like CSS, so I like you too, buddy.
Aw, aren't we cute?
Just like that. Well, welcome on stage, my friend. I'm really excited to see what you've got for us.
I got a lot. It's going to go fast. Well, thanks for coming to this talk, y'all. This is a talk all about introducing you and showing you things that are happening in CSS. Big kudos to the previous talks. Julia, Miriam, awesome. Thanks for setting the stage and getting everyone so pumped for this talk now. So I'm not going to go into tons of technical details on a lot of these. I'm just going to show you the art of the capable and just show you what CSS is doing. I put the slides in the chat, so feel free to open up these demos, find them, steal them. All that stuff is yours to have. And you can see I'm presenting live from the website, so it's almost like you're getting the director commentary on top of everything. So let's move forward. Of course, that first view transition didn't go, but don't worry, we'll see plenty more. The first topic of today is view transitions. And what I like so much about these, hey, let me make sure audio is good. Yeah, okay, don't see anybody complaining. The backstage looks, okay, cool. I'm gonna keep firing right on ahead. So view transitions are a way for you to be like, hey, browser, I'm gonna modify the page. And that could be through a link click or through actual JavaScript changing things on the page. And you have two opportunities with view transitions to enhance a user experience, to bring motion and animation, just like Julia was saying. One of them is page transitions, and the other one is, I kind of think of it like component transitions. One of them you can do entirely from CSS, and the trigger of the change is a link click, and the other is a trigger is through JavaScript. So let's just go see a couple examples and look at this CSS. That's like all you need to get started. You can literally put that line of code here. I can point at it like this. You can put this line of code in your style sheet right now. No side effects other than when people click links, they get a nice crossfade. But it can do so much more. So all these little dots are little demos I want to show you. Let me pop these open. And the other kind of cool thing to note in a lot of these demos, you're going to see I'm setting up a view transition, and then I give items names. And when you give them names, when you do a modification, the browser can look at a new position and an old position. So it's almost like it's moving on stage, and it can morph it to the new position. It's really exciting stuff. So for example, maybe you're like, how does Flexbox work? I would like to see a visual. And so here I am. I've used view transitions to simply give each of the boxes a name. And when the radios change, I tell the browser I'm about to change some styles. And then I change the styles, and the browser looks at the before state and the after state and takes each of those elements and puts them somewhere new. And I think this is just really cool. Although look, that one is aligned content. I need to figure out a better layout for these so we can align the content. Oh no. What is it that I need to do so I can like align content here? Here we go. Yeah. Anyway, really fun demo just to like visualize your changes to Flexbox. You can do that with Grid, and we'll see demos with Grid. The browser is also so naive about what before and after are. Like it doesn't know anything but the name. So in this case, I'm going to give a name to this button or this image, and then I'm going to give the same name to the dialog element that pops up. And the browser's like, cool, I'll morph from an image to a dialog because it doesn't know what it's doing. Here, pink button to a white dialog. It has no idea. Here, look, a link inside of a card, and then I make the card transition into the dialog. That's just cool stuff. And then you add some 3D flippy doos, add some CSS perspective and some timing, and then you get, cool flippies, whatever. Anyway, this is another example where I'm like, hey, browser, I'm going to drag an element and put it somewhere else in the page. And each of these list items has a view transition name. And the browser's like, cool, I can move these things around. And I don't even have to keep track of where they're going. Well, I don't know where this one's going to go. Are those swapping? I don't know. And the cool thing about this demo is this animated GIF and videos continue playing. So you can kind of change, like if you're on Spotify and you've got an audio track playing, it could morph to a different state of the player while still keeping the progress moving. It's really cool. Here's a grid example. So this is just a CSS grid. The selected item occupies 4 cells. So it spans 2 rows and 2 columns here. And when I click one, I just make that the promoted one, and grid rearranges. And then I don't have to know how the rearrange happens. They each have a view transition name, and the browser's just like, here, I'll scoot these to their new spots. And I go, thank you, browser. I have no idea why you're shuffling some of those, and I don't care. It kind of looks cool. So anyway, here's another one. Each of these numbers has a different view transition name, and I can animate them on change. So those are view transitions. They allow you to make page navigation, like here. We'll see it right here, hopefully. Yes, there's a view transition, and let's open up our dev tools. And here's, Julia showed you all the easing tool, but did you know you can go to the animations panel, slow down animations, and even slow down a full page transition? How cool is that? We can go backwards. So I've just slowed the animation down to 10% so we can see the things that the browser took a picture of. It took a picture of these items, picture of those items, and then it's slowly morphing them to and from the different positions. Well, didn't in that case, but let's move on to range syntax. I'll close the dev tools. This is just a way for you to write your media queries, I think, in a little bit more easy way. You get to use greater than or less than instead of min and max and stuff like that. And you can also specify an item in the middle. So like, is the current width less than 1024 but greater than 360? Am I somewhere squished in the middle? I think that's so much easier to read. You can also use it with container queries. And of course, you can nest them into really nice scenarios like this. So you can nest media queries and container queries now. I find I do this kind of thing all the time. Set a container, nest inside of the container. The card can ask, hey, what sort of stuff am I in here? So that's the media query range syntax. Also, by the way, at the bottom of the page, you'll see a browser support widget. This is the baseline widget, and it should tell you the current status of browser support. So if you're wondering, that will be there. And we'll kind of go progressively from less supported to more supported stuff later. Let's talk about container queries. Everyone was like, we want container queries or else CSS is incomplete. And then we got container queries and everyone's like, they're really cool, but I don't use them yet. I'm like, what? What's going on? Why aren't we all using them? There's so many cool ways to use them. So like here is a good example. I call this the always great bento grid, because no matter what layout I give it, whether it's landscape layout, a portrait layout, or if it has a weird number of boxes in it, like 3, I can use container queries and quantity queries to ask the container what it knows. And just like Miriam says, containers, they know stuff. They know a lot of stuff. And in this case, it knows how many items are in there. What's the aspect ratio of this? And then I, of course, used view transitions to animate the boxes in and out of there. So you can kind of see how all these things coming together can be really, really cool. And this is just one of my favorite container query demos, that you can move a book. This is one component in 3 different containers, getting 3 different presentations. If it's the one in the big here, like we get a big presentation, it's the same component. It doesn't even care about the viewport. It cares about the container it's in. What sector am I in? I kind of think of it like sector-driven design. Like this component, when it's in the side nav, needs to look like this. When this component's in the footer, looks like that. All of that possible with container queries. All you need to do is establish one. You can give it a name, and you say what you intend to contain or what you want to query. In this case, I want to query the width of a container. And then that opens up, any child can just ask, hey, my nearest thing that's a container, what's its size? And you can even use relative units. So you can ask it, hey, is it 40 characters big? Which is great for asking something about the content size. Again, containers, they know stuff, right? They know about the font size that's being rendered inside the container. I like these ones. You can query something by name. Sometimes it's nice to do when you're like specifically looking for a side nav sort of layout. And then here's that bento one. So I said, hey, container, perfect bento, you're containing size, which is height and width. And then the child can say, hey, perfect bento, what is your orientation? Are you in landscape or portrait? And then I can just change the grid flow. Pretty cool. So that's container queries. Let's continue on to our Cascade layers. These are a really great way to trap specificity and create your own custom layers of specificity that sort of are guided by you and created by you. And so in this particular case, what I'm showing here is just the creation of some layers, and in order, they show which ones are weak and which ones are strong. So in this case, my design.system, since it came first, is weaker than my utilities, which are coming later, and they're stronger. And I like to think about that too. Like my tokens are just sort of there to support my components and my utilities. In a lot of cases, people who are doing utility-driven design, their utilities need to be very strong. And so you can put those in a strong layer, which is kind of cool. You can also put things in layers when you import them. So here I'm like, hey, grab some stuff from NPM, open props, whoever sort of that, I don't know, put it in my design system, put some clever easings in the design system. And then when I make a component, put those in the components. So I can predefine the layers if I want. I can also create layers on the fly when I import. I can also do both, where I define my layers and then I import things into them. You can also just make a layer anonymously or make a layer with a name in the moment. So like in your component.style sheet, you can just create you can like append yourself into an existing layer like this one's doing, add in a new nested nav layer, and you can nest these layers to your heart's content. And they show up in DevTools too, like in the styles pane, you can see the stack, and the stack also reads really nice because you can be like, oh, look, base styles, oh, component styles, and then here's my overrides or whatever. You can kind of leave this like breadcrumb of stuff you do. And in this case, here's one where I have unlayered styles next to layered styles. And I like to put the layered styles in one called demo.support. So you're just like, hey, ignore this stuff. This is just stuff supporting the cool part. And then up here, I'm like, this is the cool part. This is like, if you're wondering how I did the demo in this code pen, look at that stuff. And so layers kind of leave even notes behind or comments because you're kind of naming a section of styles. And look at the browser support, kicks butt. So here's paint order. All we need to do is look at this one. We go to paint order. We're like, here's what paint order is by default, is the top here, where it draws the background fill color and then and I'm like, that looks terrible. How about we do the stroke and then the fill? Well, now we're cooking. So yeah, that's just paint order. That one's in browsers everywhere. And I think that is just nice to know. So in case you didn't know, that's a cool little SVG update. Paint order. Here's field sizing. So this one's really cool when you want your text inputs or your select elements to fit the content that they are, or to like be mindful of content. Because until this feature, we were sort of always at the whim of an input being pretty extrinsically sized. And this kind of converts them into an intrinsic size. So like, here's a good example. We'll just show it. Here's a text area as we've known today. I've set a little bit of a height on it so it has some space. Here's a select element that, look, even though I selected the value high, it's as long as the longest option. So it's like a safe choice. Same thing with this, my text or my multi-select. My items don't grow when I type text into them. My email doesn't grow. And here, all I've added is field sizing content. You can see the styles right over here. And now I can type into an input and it grows. I can also set a max width. I can set a min width. So I have options to control it, but there's no JavaScript for that to work anymore. Same thing with the select element. I can select high and look, it fits the word perfectly. If you've ever tried to do this with JavaScript where you're like, oh, the word high has 2 characters. I will make it 2 characters wide. You're like, oh man, I can run into issues with that real quick. Look at the letter I isn't even as wide as a single character. Plus, when you use the character unit, it's like the average of the width of the number 0. And the letter I is much skinnier. Anyway, and then you have the M that shows up and it's all huge. But whatever, so you can try to count characters if you want, or you can just use CSS field sizing. So you can do it on your text inputs. And look at how it's also the width of the placeholder so that the full placeholder can be read. And now when I start typing the email, it shrinks to fit. Same thing with numbers. It's good stuff. So that's field sizing. And then here's just a kind of prettier version, like, ooh, like, yeah, that looks nice. Yeah, not quite as chonky as the previous ones, but cool. Field sizing, what a nice little CSS upgrade. I do find when I use it, I have to kind of write these defensive styles where I'm like, now that it's collapsing, you should minimally be this size. Oh, now that you're able to grow out of freaking control, how about I make you have a max block size? And then I sort of like do other things. Anyway, there's some defensive styles you have to add in there for field sizing. All right, color scheme. So this one is a way for you to, so normally up until now, we just, you got a white style sheet from the browser. It's like, hey, white background, black text. Well, now you can say, I want a dark version. Oh, look, my tool. I need to switch to my pointer again, switch to the pointer tools and arrow one. Yeah, I must have hit a key. There we go. Now you can ask for a dark style sheet. So dark style sheet will literally now create a dark background on your web page and have light text, and all of your form inputs will have a dark color scheme. So it's really, really nice. Let's just go check that out real quick. Here's color scheme. So color scheme also works at like a component level. Well, and there's the light dark function, which we'll get into soon. But we have color scheme. This one has it unconditionally. Okay, so what I'm showing here is that you don't have to use it at the page level. You can do it at a component level. I'm hoping the page level one is here. Oh, no, this one's going into next gen, sort of like nesting these things together with the style query for, I was hoping to show the light dark, inputs. Oh, you know what we can do is we can go back to this one. Let's open up this field sizing example. And I think if I just switch my browser to, here, let's just open up DevTools, go to dark mode, which maybe y'all don't know this little handy paintbrush right here. And you can go to dark mode right here. A lot of people do it the hard way, but there's a paintbrush. I had to fight hard to get that paintbrush in there. Anyway, look at all our dark inputs for free, among other things that you get for using the color scheme property. So in addition to like the color scheme opting you into a different default style sheet, you also get access to this function, which can easily allow you to specify a light color and a dark color. So now you can sort of like in a couple lines have a nice theme that then works across all these nested components. So that's where that example I showed earlier is once you have that light dark function and you're using color scheme, you can swap at various moments of your UI and then swap your colors very easily using light dark. So kind of cool. And then here's more light dark functions. So we kind of saw like, here's a basic example of getting a light dark customized style sheet. So you use the color scheme. You're like, hey, browser, I have a light dark ready. You can easily customize them here. And then this is something I like to do, which is make a couple of surface colors and a couple of text colors. So now I have like a dominant background color. I have a color that looks raised in front of it, almost like a card. And then I have text colors as like a primary text color and a secondary text color. Just a few lines of code with the light dark function. You have dual themes. We are going to extend that function in the future to allow other themes, but for now it is only light and dark. But anticipate that that could be extended into grape and watermelon and ketchup and mustard or whatever it is that you fancy. Let's talk about accent colors. So while we're on the theme of kind of browser built-in modifications and stuff like that, you've got accent color, which is an easy way for you to tint those inputs. So not only can you easily get dark inputs now, you can also tint them. See this little color? The browser lets us tint that now with one CSS property. And if you look here, look, it shows a dark checkbox and a dark background. If I go to a different color, let's change hue. Let's go dark. Yes. Look, I got a light checkbox. So the browser is going to manage your contrast accessibility for these elements. And then here is a good example of accent color being used to make a slider black, which I just think makes it look punk rock. And then I hooked it up to app property and then used linear. So Julia showed us the linear easing function, which we'll look at here in a second. And I just give that little bounce, a little bit of life, and boom, I'm powering a gradient with just a slider. And just anyway, I think it's fun. Plus it does the invert color thing, which is just kind of cute, right? Sometimes it's just little things that go a long way, right? So that's accent color. It just looks like this. Accent dash color, put whatever you want in there, and you can also put it on elements specifically. Kind of cool. So here's app property. These are your typed custom properties. So if you have a custom property, it's kind of like a JavaScript variable. It can be anything, willy-nilly, you know, but if you type it, and JavaScript can't do that at runtime, you can only do that through TypeScript and stuff like that, but CSS can enforce types at runtime. That's why I call this example unbreakable color, because it says, I am of syntax type color, and here's my initial value. Those two things allow it to be type safe as a color, and it will always have a valid value. So since the initial value is a color, anything you try to set in here, like a number or something that's not a color, the browser just goes, that's not a color. I will not accept that value. And then it just goes back to its last known value. This is really great for design systems so that people can't show up and put a weird value in a custom property and break this whole chain of events that's happening. So app property can help you protect your chain of custom properties, can also create interpolable examples. Go ahead and say that to yourself. Just see if you can. Interpolatable examples. Okay, now I'm just having fun as if none of y'all are here, but you are. So breaking the third wall. Back to the talk. Okay, interpolatable percentage. What this particular example is saying that now that it's of a type and it knows that it can be a type, it can go from 0 to 100 in it very simply. And it can do that with a hover as a transition. So look, I'm transitioning a custom property specifically, and it's getting its own easing so that when it goes from 0 to 100%, it's going to go over 1 second and ease out. This is amazing. There's so much JavaScript that we do that's called lerping, linear interpolation, where you have to do this manually, and it sucks. And here it is in CSS, piece of cake. You can also do it with keyframes. So I'm going to, here I've got a percentage that I anticipate on animating, and I can animate it in keyframes and just say go to 100%. And I can apply that and use that in a whole bunch of different areas. So let's go look. Oh, here's a thought experiment. Let's see if this works. Let's go here. I'm going to share this in the chat. Everybody click this, enable your mic, and start making noise. Okay, I'm enabling my mic. We'll see here, allow here. There's no one in the room yet. It's just my noise. Oh, we got 3 people in the room. We got 4 people, 6 people, 8 people in the room. And as soon as they make noise, their noise will collide with my noise, and we'll have noise chaos on the screen thanks to gradients and app property. So this whole entire demo is powered by app property. What we're doing is we're taking audio, splitting it into 2 pieces. That's why I have like donuts and stuff like that. And then using those to power gradient animations like we saw with the slider. So now instead of the slider, I'm using our voices, and our voices are driving this noise. And then if you go to the settings, you can change your kind of style of gradient. So yeah, here's a nice linear one. Here's a conic gradient. Yeah. Anyway, looks like we've got some chaos going on. Oh yes, look at that chaos. Thank you, everybody. That was an awesome experiment. We got 25 people in the room. Boom, I'm burning on. Okay, scroll-driven animation. Oh, this one is so cool. This one is so cool. I think I just hit Command S. I did. All right, so there's 2 different flavors of this, kind of like view transitions, except instead of a CSS and JavaScript variant, what you have is a one that's tied directly to scroll. So notice how the entirety of scroll is changing animation. And that's, again, look, I got an app property over here that's got an angle. I'm animating the angle just to 1 turn. So that's 360 degrees. That's going to rotate us around the whole hue. And then here's the background of the demo. And so all I'm doing is on scroll, rotating an angle, which I'm using that angle as a background color. And now I can rotate the entire hue rainbow and OKLCH from top to bottom of a scroller using the scroll function, which is right here. Scroll, not saying the entirety of the scroll area becomes the range of keyframes. Like if it was After Effects, instead of having a scrubber, your scroller is the scrubber of time. So here's another example. This one uses scroll, but I've created clamped spaces on them so that they only are, each element as like a stagger effect is only going to get a portion of the scroll port for its own effect. And so here we're seeing just a whole bunch of staggered items in a grid on the page. Just imagine like a matrix of elements that are all flat. But when their animation starts, they're pushed way behind, and when their animation ends, they're way past the camera. And that allows us to create this effect as if it's zooming through our face, which is very satisfying. And it's all off the main thread. This is all CSS powered. You can totally put this behind prefers, reduce media queries. Anyway, there's all sorts of cool stuff in here. And that one's animation ranges become really important when you want to take the entirety of a scroller, but only represent a portion of it. Here's one. Look at this. We've got a few lines of code. We create some keyframes. Hey, start from opacity 0 with no box shadow and be scaled out and translated down a little bit. But as you approach the scroll port, and when you reach 50% of the viewport, play the entirety of the keyframes. And here we have each item uniquely getting its own moment at 0 to 50%. You can see each element gets its own, and it's powering this one set of keyframes, powering all these, and what kind of feels like a very natural stagger, because you're getting a responsive stagger. The browser lays these things out, and then you're just saying, hey, introduce yourself as you come into the bottom of the viewport. Few lines of code. This exact one, I have so many places on my website and other things because it's very, very meaningful to, as something enters the viewport, present it. You can also do scrolly telling. So this particular example allows me to, this element is observing this element. So I'm broadcasting outward out of the page this element's intersection with the scroll port. So as it goes up from here and out the top, that's 0 to 100% of an animation that I'm using to power this rotation. So scroll-driven animations allows you to create these moments that are sort of like, pub sub. Any item can publish its intersection across a viewport, and any other element can register and listen to that and power its animation keyframes. This one's a nice showy example of how you can use scroll-driven animations to present items in, create a sort of faux stack, use scroll snap, combine all these things together, create what feels like an iOS or an Android app switcher. Really cool stuff, just a few lines of CSS. And then I really like this one. We're using variable fonts, which has this setting called morph, and I can animate morph from 0 to 60 using view. So as this element is crossing the scroll port, and now I get an animated morphing demo. Keep CSS weird. I love this demo. I love this demo because it's so simple. It's like a scalpel, and no design tool is even going to have this for like years. Years. A design tool is, you're literally like 5 years out, Figma, from having this feature. A, you can't even access morph. B, you don't have scroll-driven animations. And C, you can't tie them together with just a couple clicks. I'm going to get all worked up. All right, and here's a site that I have called this is at nerdy.dev/notebook, which is where I keep a bunch of like demos and stuff. And I just have all sorts of fun scroll animations in here. Look, slither. It's like slithering in here. If I zoom in, does it zoom? Can I double tap to zoom? Whatever. There's some really fun ones at the bottom too, where they come in and out. Like, look at this Z stack. Look at the candy cane. Candy cane. I just sat at home with my kids and made these for fun. Look, the dry cleaners, right? I mean, it's sideways. You have to tilt your head, but with synchronized swimmers. Okay, whatever, I'm done. Those are really fun. Go enjoy those. And please steal the code. I'm not kidding. Linear. This is a way for you to add a lot of life to your animations. Julia showed you a little bit of it, but there's also other ways to use it other than sort of like, well, here, I'll just show you. We don't expect anyone to write this junk. This junk is not easy, but it is cool when you put that into a custom property called Spring. And then you're like, well, here, I just want to transform with some springy vibes. I also have a whole bunch of them in open props. So you can go to openprops.style, openprops.style. At the bottom, click on the easing. And I've got a whole bunch of bounces for you and springs. So you can kind of just say easing, ease spring 1, and it's like a light spring. Or if you say ease spring 5, it's like a tight spring. There's a lot of energy. And then the bounces is, how many bounces do you want? Do you want 5 bounces or 1 bounce? And you just ask for it via a prop. We also made a tool to help you. And the tool is called the linear easing generator. You can pass in SVG, or you can upload some JavaScript, or you can just change the JavaScript values here for like real physics, and it will output a static version of that animation for you. So you can just go steal the values that this makes for you and put them in your project and really tease them out. But I feel like the little bit of bounce brings a lot of life to so many of my demos. It's a clutch aspect that I think really distinct. And also one thing you'll notice when you add springy effects and stuff like that, the duration of an animation becomes much longer. So a lot of these previous tips that you'll hear, like 250 milliseconds for an entry animation, 100 for exit, or whatever they say, that's all sounds absolute and de facto, it's out the window once you have springy animations, because you want those to feel soft, and have them be soft, they can sometimes take a whole second. So this is one thing I just like to get on a high horse about this one for a second, because a lot of people don't know about prefer reduced transparency as a media query or a feature in your operating system. And I think a lot of designers would be like, ew, I don't want to worry about someone with reduced transparency. I'm like, man, look at this cool opportunity you have. This isn't just a moment where you have to like downgrade some experience. I actually prefer the one on the right. It's reduced transparency, and it's honestly kind of showcasing the plants better. So I don't think these are necessarily things you have to be upset about. I think they're opportunities to be better. And here's a cool example I like. This one's adaptive frosted glass, because the frosted glass effect with a couple of custom property tweaks just allow you to have a dark version also. And I think that's cool. So we can use prefer reduced transparency. Also, Julia showed this. So if we hit Command-Shift-P, go to the rendering tab, underneath prefers reduced motion, which is right here, there's prefers reduced transparency, and you can test it and reduced. Look at that. So when the person is in a reduced state, I just kind of knock it out entirely, although it is subtly still there. They asked for it to be reduced, y'all. They didn't ask for it to be none. I think that's really critical. So anyway, prefers reduced transparency. That's an opportunity, y'all. That's not a problem. Here's a fun one. You can now put HRs into a select, although you can do a lot more in a select. Now we'll get into that soon. Am I right with customizable select? Woohoo! But here, this one's just cool right off the bat. And HR, and what that looks like is this. When you pop it open, you got little dividers between your sections. And I think that just helps. So do it. Put an HR in your select, y'all. There's also a new element called a search element. It's sort of, it encourages and adds the ARIA roles for various things that you're trying to do in a search. So you might as well just use the search element, get a bunch of stuff for free, And then here's a good example if you want to see what those are like. It's just a search box. It's not that crazy. But what's fun is that the accessibility of that is enhanced with just that wrapping tag. Let's talk about user valid and user invalid. So previously we only had valid and invalid, and I call them eager. They're quick to tell a user that they're wrong. And user valid and user invalid are they're lazy. They're like waiting for the user to have actually interacted with it. So I think this is best shown with like a demo. Right, so here, look, it's already marked invalid. You're like, invalid? I haven't even touched it yet. Look at this one, invalid. Like, I haven't even written my email. Well, it's empty. How could empty be invalid? It's like really frustrating. And so if it's user invalid though, it waits for me to screw it up before telling me I'm wrong. Before this one, you know, it tells me I'm wrong both times. And then here's user valid. This one does seem to wait for you. There, and user valid. Gotcha. So those are user valid and user invalid. I think almost all the time you're going to want user invalid just because it doesn't prompt a user and get mad at them right away. And then what's cool too in this demo is you can use has plus user invalid should show a wavy underline. Ah, yes. Okay. So here we get the wavy underline on there using has to check to see if there's user invalid. And I think that's kind of a cool little hot tip for you. So small demo. Big impact though, I hope. And I don't remember what this last demo is. What's this one? Oh, it's a check mark, I think. Yeah, see, you can add a little check mark in there. Pretty cool. Okay, let's keep going on. How much time we got? All right, we're doing okay. There's not too much left. So here's exclusive accordion. You can now put a name attribute on your accordion or on your details element, kind of like radio group, and it connects them together. You can also animate these now. So open up the styles in here to see how they're animated. There's some cool new features that were added to make that happen. But yeah, so it closes the other ones while opening a new one. Boom, you connected them together just like a radio group. There's been a lot of cool advancements to summary details. All the math that you could want, I'm not going to go into a lot of these, but all the math that you want is there. We can do rotations, pow, you got logarithms, you got decays, all the stuff that you want. You can even kind of simulate physics. There's a bunch of demos in here, but I'm going to skip them for now. They are cool. And there's even more functions. The CSS working group, Jeff, you're like, the CSS is so hard to follow. There just seem to, or it's just like there's so much going on. Is it done yet? And we're like, no, we have so many plans, more things to do. Just like Mio is like, I'm going to fix logical properties so that we have a valid shorthand for that. I'm like, heck yeah. All that stuff is still needed. There's so many more functions. Actually, sibling count, these are in Canary. You can prototype with these. Those are very exciting. None of the other ones, although I think toggle, maybe crossfade is. Anyway, these are all things that are on the working group's mind, and we'll see them get into browsers eventually. Let's talk about text wrap. This one is easiest to show. So here we have unbalanced header. Look at, we have a little dingle, and look, we got a dingle here, and we've got, this one has a dingle, but this one doesn't. Anyway, so let's see the difference between pretty and balanced text wrapping. So right now in the web, text wrapping is very natural per letter. We can give you some awkward endings. You can ask for better wrapping from the browser. Now, this one does balanced wrapping, and look, it created this box. Look at it, it early hits return. It didn't hit the edge of the containing area, but it did an early wrap, so it created a nice box shape. This one is more subtle. It only does little changes to make sure that you don't have any widows or orphans or dingles, as I was having fun calling them. And so you can see before and after, not balanced, not pretty, balanced, and pretty. This is a very easy CSS application for you to do. So here it is. There's balanced and there's pretty. We have text wrap balance, text wrap pretty. And let's go look at the browser support, because that should be in the matrix. Oh, here it is animated. You can kind of see it over time. Oh, this is just fun to do. Like, look at this. Every language, right? It's not supposed to be animated, so sometimes it freaks out. But still, I love that it creates these like beautiful harmonious blocks. Oh, here I can pause it. Look at that. That is so cool. And so this works any language, any font. You don't have to do manual line breaks, which is kind of what designers were doing in the past. And look at that, baseline 2024, newly available, every browser. Get on that text wrap balance, y'all. Animation composition is a way for you to combine keyframes together. So this is like if you have two competing animations, one shakes up and down and one shakes left and right. Before this, they would battle. One would win over the other. And now you can ask them to blend with the animation composition add. I'm just going to kind of skip that one. because I have some other demos I want to show. So we got color mix. Also, you can mix in the browser now live. There's all sorts of cool uses for that, for like making a transparent color. You can nest them and put these inside of each other. You can choose the color space that you're mixing in, which does have a big difference on what you're getting. Let's see if my demo is up. Yeah, so here I can take this color. I'll grab pink, and then the amount I'm mixing is here. And you can kind of see it here. I'll zoom in. You can see the syntax being written here, and the result is something that I can, oh, did I lose my tool? I think I lost my, yeah, I'm back in the box here. Boop-a-doop, let me go back to the arrow. Yeah, arrow, great. Okay, so yeah, so now you can mix and you can see the results down here. These are the two colors I'm mixing, and you can change what you're mixing in. Look at that. Look at the difference between HSL and OK, what was it, OK Lab before? Oh man. That is gnarly. This one is much more like the actual mix of these colors. So yeah, color mix. Do that live in the browser. We've also got color spaces. So all sorts of new colors. I call it like Blu-ray colors because you're now in like this HDR, this high dynamic range space. Your phone, your computer, most of your monitors and your TVs you're buying these days all tout millions and millions of colors. And if you're using hex colors or HSL, you're literally asking for VHS colors, as if that person's display didn't have better colors at all. You're coloring your website with old school crayons that are 25 years old, and there are new crayons in the browser. These are markers compared to your crayons, and they're here and they're beautiful. In fact, let's just go to gradient.style really quick. This is a gradient editor I made. You can see there's this button up here. The top left is called HDR. Oh, here, can I zoom in? Zoom in, yeah, refresh just so it sizes. So here's the HDR button. If I click this, you can see the old school gradient and the new school gradient. We can go to this one. This is the HDR gradient, and here's the HD gradient. You can see this one's just a little washed out, like the sun's been on it. You know, it's a crayon versus a marker. All sorts of opportunities to create these gradients. Plus, this tool is kind of cool in case you want to like make your own gradients. Anyway, it's fun stuff. Okay, anyway. That's color spaces and their impacts on gradients and stuff like that. We also have relative colors. So this is your ability to take one color from another color. So in this case, I'm lightening it by 25%. It's kind of like destructuring, where you take the blue and you break it up based on what you want, which is LCH. So it's like, hey, blue, become LCH. And then I can calc on L. So it's like you destructure the color into your requested format, and then you get to perform calculations on those different values. So that one, lightening, moving the lightness up. This one sets the lightness to 75%. There's all, look here, if you want to do alpha, you don't have to mix with alpha. You can just say, hey, blue, I want a 50% transparent version of you. Piece of cake. And there's all sorts of examples like that. I even recently put on here, if we go to nerdy.dev/notebook, I just posted a thing on relative color. Relative color, yeah. So here's that destructuring I'm talking about, and all sorts of examples here. How to lighten, how to boost the chroma, how to do all these things here. Let's just open all of them. Access and alpha, pass and entirely, yeah, desaturate, lighten and darken, grayscale things. Anyway, all there for you to do. Okay, scroll bars. You can easily customize the scroll bar. Here it is. I got a pink one. You know, just hot pink in the background color. So the thumb color and the background color, pretty straightforward. Starting style allows for easy entry effects. As soon as an item is on the page or its first render, you can say, hey, start off stage. This is, I think of starting style, like, where should I be off stage? So that way, when I become on stage, I'll enter from here. So I enter from opacity and scale up. So it's going to be faded out and land on the screen in a cool way. Oh, I see where I keep messing up that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I'm back to it. Sweet. And starting styles, yeah, present the thing. So look, you transition opacity and scale, add a starting style. Anytime these things have this class, they'll animate themselves in. It's really cool. You'll see that on a lot of demos. And it's also required for the way that dialog and popover are animated, which I think are where we're going next. Yep. So we got dialog, which is a synchronous blocking interaction. And then there's like popover, which I think of as asynchronous. And the reason here is because dialog is inert. It kind of makes the whole rest of the page not usable until they focus on the stuff in your dialog. And so that's why I call it synchronous. And the other one asynchronous, because you can just overlay stuff for them. And there's all sorts of cool demos in here about how you can turn the dialog, which by default looks very terrible, by the way. It is a really horrid looking default. But look at how amazing you can make it look. I'm pushing the page back, sliding it in, bouncing it around. In this one, I'm sliding at a panel. I've customized the cursor and given a sort of light dismiss effect. All of the things you want to do with these slide out panels can be done with Dialog. You just got to focus in on them and steal my code. Just go steal my code. I have a blog post called Have a Dialog, and it's like all in there for free. Popovers the same way. These things you can show and hide them with declarative attributes now, which is kind of cool. But here's like a popover, right? This is non-blocking. It's not required that a user goes in to interact with this. And then I've used CSS anchoring to position these perfectly over top of these items, which is really cool. And look, here's a blog post called Steal This Popover Code. I'm trying to give this stuff away for y'all. Okay, I feel like I'm creeping up on time. Let's go to anchor positioning. Maybe we'll skip it. Just know that there is anchor positioning. It's on Interop 2025 this year, which means it'll be in every browser. It's a very cool way to position things with really nice keywords. I'm using it all the time. And then it has this ability to auto flip to be above or below the element based on what's available. You can also look to see how much height is available in the viewport before it shows. It's got a lot of cool automatic features. We've got at scope, which I'm going to skip. It's a way for you to, it's a CSS language feature for you to control your selectors and how far they reach. We have text box trim, which is a godsend and pretty much going to be in every default style sheet now. I don't want that demo. I want one of these here. Yeah. So if you've ever been in this situation where your font isn't aligned with the top of the box, you can fix that. You can trim that extra space off now on the top and the bottom so that you can perfectly fit inside of this area. And look, now you get that layout that looks very nice. Same thing with padding. If you've ever had to do weird padding on a button, you're like, hey, how come 10 pixel padding everywhere around is not centered? That's because there's these half letting space. There's space above and below the letters here, but not if you trim it. So if you trim it 10 pixels, literally in the center. Kind of cool. Then we have a couple more left. We have custom select, which just recently landed in Chrome 136, like this week. And this is the ability for you to fully customize the select element. And so here's a custom select. I've customized what goes in it. I've added these little visual indicators. I've customized the check mark, and I can customize what shows in the selected state. And so in this case, I'm choosing to show the indicator and the label fully. In this case, I'm showing the user and their avatar fully. This one, I've added the label into the little selector box. I've added sticky headers into my selection here. And it's almost like an HR, but I get to style the HR. And this last one's kind of wild with a nice big layout, published and draft, and I'm only taking in that one label. The way that all this kicks off is with this one selector called base select. So you select the element itself and its picker, which is like the popover that it shows, and opt into the base select. This is kind of like appearance none, but this is appearance base. And this transforms the select element into one that exposes all the parts for you to customize. You could customize the picker, the overlay, customize the check marks, customize that selected content, and more. It's good stuff. And the last one on our list here is Carousel. So CSS Carousel, it's easy to think about it like Carousel, but it's actually not for carousels. It's much, much more. So really what you need to think about is scroll buttons and scroll markers. This is your ability to take any normal scrolling area and add a convenience of a browser controlled button. Just like as if they were little, like, you know, if you have a scroller and it's got the arrows on each side, but it only nudges it just a little bit, you can add buttons onto your scroller that nudge it a lot of bit and nudges it 85%. And scroll markers are a way for you to make content discoverable. You can take something that's way off in a scroller and make a little dot that's visible for users so they know that there's how many are in this scroller and what's there. And I made a couple of really good, oh, look, I got like a little exposed link here. That's fun. So let's go custom select. Yep. Here's the configurator. So this allows you to sort of like add each piece and see how it works. So I'm just like, I got a regular ULLI. I add some buttons to it, and then it tells you the styles that it takes to get those buttons. So here I'm selecting the scroll button selector, styling them position fixed. I'm anchoring them to the carousel. And then this is where I create them. I find scroll button right, and I give it content, and I give it an accessible name. So now this button will have the text of next in it. And so just like a regular pseudo element where you give it content and it magically appears, scroll buttons will magically appear if you select them and give them some content. And then you style them, position them. Same thing with markers. So I've taken off the buttons and add the navigation. So now I have dots representing all these different items in here. As I scroll, it automatically updates. Oh, it's worth noting too, the buttons automatically update their disabled state so that they only work when they're available. Anyway, and the markers are the same way. We create a marker, we target it. So we want a marker for each LI. We add some empty content. Then we get a pseudo selector for when that element is selected. And then we get this marker group to contain all the markers that we added. And here I'm just using display grid with 20 columns, some pretty standard stuff. So that configurator is good for learning. This gallery is good for experiencing all of the capabilities that are possible. So pop in here and just see like all your classic scenarios are here. This is there's no JavaScript in this entire website. So all of these are just driven with these new features of scroll buttons and scroll markers, a little bit of anchoring, maybe some grid layout, and we've got all sorts of meaningful examples. Even look, your markers can be images. So this is thumbnail. So instead of dots, it's just got a background image on it, right? It's just a little element with a background image. And then there's also, where's the TV series? Yeah, TV series, your markers can also be text. So now when I click these, they're just like a marker. They scroll me to season 1, scroll me to season 2. Kind of cool. So your markers allow you to create accessible content that's and they operate just like in-page links. They get grouped together. The accessibility in the dev tree is looking really good here. Let's just one little quick peek at that. I hit the accessibility man here, and here's my list. My tab list is my group of markers, and here's my list items. This one doesn't have the scroll buttons, so let's go find one that has the scroll buttons and look at those in the page. Accessibility man. Here's the tab list. Hey, where are the buttons? They should be in here. Oh, here they are in the dev tools. So scroll button, inline, and you can select them, see their styles. Anyway, let's close out of that. And there's a template on this demo. So in case you want to go make a carousel, start with this one. It's got all the basics in here for you in a nice, easy way. That is CSS Carousel. That was a whole bunch of CSS stuff. Thanks for sticking through that. I'm winded. Are you winded? Did I do it on time? I don't know. I'm just like, I'm popping out of some altered reality right now. Jeff, save me. I'm rambling at the end of my talk.
I can't. I'm also panting and incredibly winded from all this. I mean, I feel like I just ran a marathon. You gave us so much brain runway to go with, and just looking at the comments in the chat, I'm like, holy crap! I think everyone feels the same way, and that's not a bad thing. This is the good kind of brain exercise we like. This is the good kind of mental gymnastics that we enjoy doing. I'm just like, gosh, where do I even start? I mean, I just have the impossible job of talking to you after all of this. But I mean, out of all of the goodies that you showed us today, are there any that you're having the most fun with out of all of them?
Yeah, scroll-driven animations. Although view transitions also, view transitions are just because like, you're so sneaky, right? It's just like that demo I showed where I call it this to that. Because the browser's like, I don't know what this is or what that is. And it's like, I'm a powerful moron. And I'm like, yeah, you are. And I'm going to have you do cool stuff. And it goes, and it's just like, anyway. So yeah, I feel very powerful. But scroll animations add so much subtlety with like this little bit of code. And so I feel like that CSS Zen garden vibe where I'm like, ooh, I'm in the garden. I just created this beautiful line. It was just a couple lines of CSS and I get this elegant result. But then again, carousels. I've been doing a lot with carousels. It's also exciting, dude. It's hard. Color too, whatever. View transitions. That's my final answer.
Final answer. Are you gonna phone a friend on that one? No, no. That it's just unbelievable what you're able to demo for us today in a live browser. Because I know some folks were like, oh wait a second, how is he demoing these things? Are these live demos? Yeah, they are live. They're right there.
This was
in
Chrome
the page.
Stable. Yeah, sometimes I do Chrome Canary, but that was Chrome Stable.
That is unbelievable. And I know you had to actually skip a few topics as well, like anchor positioning and at scope. Are there any other features that like you intentionally had to leave out of the presentation just for real estate and out of room that you feel like are worth calling out?
Yeah, we skipped the math ones, which I really like a lot of the math ones because they show oscillating examples, which the web has not been very good at. And they're just delightful to see like a bird flying across the screen with like custom properties that you can change values of. So the math stuff in there. There was additional carousel features that I didn't go into. One of them is called interactivity, which has also been very hot in the CSS working group this week. But it allows you to like make the elements that aren't visible in scroll to not be focusable from your keyboard, all from CSS. And then you combine that with scroll-driven animation or scroll. Oh, we didn't go over scroll state queries either. Here, scroll state.
Right.
They were in the talk. They're all over. We just didn't explicitly show them. So here, let's send that in here. This is a really cool feature for container queries, doing more than just querying the size of something, but it's actually querying whether something is snapped. So you get to know if something's snapped, if it's stuck. Here's a sticky example, right? So it scrolls into view. As soon as it's stuck, you add a shadow. It's like the classic thing. It's all from CSS, sticky headers. And then, you know, snapped also. So when something is snapped. So the snapped one is clutch too, because you can say anything not snapped is not focusable. So that way, when they tab into your element, they tab to the one that's visibly promoted, and then they can use their arrow keys to move throughout all the elements. It's really cool stuff. So yeah, scroll state. It's cool.
Man, after Miriam's talk, I was like, oh man, as the authors, we're the enemy. That's why, you know, important exists. And now, and now you're saying, oh, these are big, intelligent morons that we're collaborating with. It's just a whole different perspective of how we're collaborating with the browser and get to experiment with it, and how we just have this back and forth with technology, you know, and doing it. I think it's just super awesome what you're doing. And I just thank the heck out of you for making time for us.